presentation featuring Dr. Christine Skelly from Michigan State University. In her presentation, Dr. Skelly will discuss the selection of the right youth horse. Selecting the right youth horse for your child is one of the most important purchase decisions you will make in your horse endeavors. A good youth horse is a special equine friend, instilling confidence and good life skills to its young owners. However, the wrong youth horse combination can result in frustration and high expenses at the very least, and in serious injury at the very worst. There may be many great horses to consider in your search, but in all likelihood, only a few of those horses will be appropriate for your child. This presentation, selecting the right youth horse, will help you whether you are a parent, 4-H leader, pony club leader, or a professional horse person. Prioritize factors that are critical to selecting the right horse for a young equestrian. Background on Dr. Christine Skelly. Since 1995, Dr. Christine Skelly has served as the Equine Extension Specialist at Michigan State University, developing and teaching horse management workshops targeted to horse owners and producers, and working with industry leaders to promote the Michigan horse industry. Her primary areas of interest in equine science include nutrition, facility management, and farm safety, and manure management. Dr. Chris Skelly earned her PhD in equine nutrition at Texas A&M University. Let's turn it over to Dr. Skelly.
Thank you, and I'm really glad to be here tonight. And we will get started with our presentation, Horse Selection for the Young Rider. Many of us, when we were kids, dreamed of owning a horse, and as some of the parents in the audience realize, sometimes those dreams never go away. Many of the adults in our audience maybe still have dreams of owning a horse and are looking for a horse for themselves, but our children too can just be passionate about horses. It was probably the first thing that I was ever passionate about in my life, and that was owning a horse. So we want to fulfill these dreams for our kids, whether it's sending them to a really nice lesson stable so that they can ride horses on a weekly basis, and in some cases then it's actually purchasing a horse and restyling our family's life basically around horse ownership. But there's many plus sides to owning a horse as a child. Obviously, it's going to increase the responsibility that that child has for an animal. Many times it takes teamwork, not only with family members to negotiate chores and time commitments, but also if the child becomes competitive with their horse, there's teamwork experience with both the horse and the child, as well as there's many high school equestrian teams formed throughout the country that our children can take advantage of, or being on drill teams with other 4-H'ers. It's a lot of fun for kids. Horses teach patience. We all know that. I think that I use a lot of the skills I've developed over my lifetime working with horses to raise my 4-year-old son. So these again are life building skills that we can learn with our animals. Conflict resolution. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're working with a live being that thinks and feels and may not necessarily react the way you want them to react. So we're constantly trying to resolve conflicts with our animals. And as a child learns to do this, we're building and instilling confidence with our children, something that they can take with them and utilize in other aspects of our life. Also, just being part of the horse world opens the door for our children to make friends with other kids who have a similar wholesome interest in horses. So those are some of the positive aspects of horse ownership for kids. And If we're lucky, then we come to the point where we're trying to decide what is going to be a good match for my child. And first thing we want to do is actually look at the child. What's the age of the child? Are we talking about a potential lead line horse or pony for the child to ride if they're extremely young and don't have the motor skills or muscle development to control a horse? Or are we looking at something more appropriate for riding and what style of riding? We also want to look at the size of the child. It's always best if we can appropriately match the size of the horse to the size of the rider. It makes the experience probably even more meaningful because then the child can do a lot more of the groundwork with the horse. We're very concerned about the experience level of the child. Assuming that it's the child's first horse, we need to get a horse that's been through the world, has seen a lot, experienced a lot, and is now going to share this experience with our child. What are the goals and expectations of owning a horse? If you're thinking that you would like to show in 4-H shows or breed association shows, that's going to affect the type of horse that you buy. What are your current resources? Do you have people in the area that can work with your child and horse on a weekly basis? What type of facilities do you have, and what's your financial situation? How much initial investment are you willing to make on this horse? And also, what are your children's social needs? I've seen a lot of kids that really excel in the lesson type environment, and then once they get their own horse and maybe bring that horse to their backyard, they start to lose interest because they've lost the social aspect of being around horses since they don't have access to the other kids in the lesson program. So you really want to think about how your child is going to best pursue their dreams of working with horses. And then we look at the horse, and some of the things that we're going to talk in more depth about here are the age of the horse. In general, you wouldn't even consider a horse that was under 5 years of age. And for most of our horse purchases, we need a horse that's much older than 5. When we're looking at the sex of the horse, usually just geldings or mares are suitable for children. We'll talk a little bit more about size, breed, and gaits of horses. And then also, just to mention, you never want to prioritize color when you're purchasing a horse. And that may sound kind of funny because some of our breeds, like Paints, Appaloosas, our Pintos, Palominos, are known for their flashy color. But when we're purchasing a horse for our child, we want to put all opinions and preferences for color on the back burner and really get the horse that's most suitable for that child based on their level of training and temperament. So again, going back to age, we said that a horse needs to be at least 5 years of age and preferably much older if we're dealing with very young or inexperienced riders. Horses may start to really get seasoned at around 7 years of age. Some horses, like some people, are just late to mentally mature. So it may not be until they're early to mid-teens that they really start acting like a mature horse. They don't spook as much. They're not as reactive over some day-to-day occurrences around the farm. Old age doesn't equate to good training or disposition. So just because a horse is 20 plus doesn't necessarily mean that they're highly trained or that they have good barn manners or a good temperament. So we want to be careful about just buying a horse because it's old. We want to also make sure that the training and the temperament of the horse matches our expectations for our children. The worst thing we can do when we're selecting a horse for a child is select a horse that's young or inexperienced or not very well trained and expect that the child and the horse will learn together. This scenario is a case for disaster, and we see it time and time again where a family purchases a horse, maybe a 2 or 3 year old that definitely is a beautiful horse, has a lot of potential, but it's just the wrong case scenario for a child to work with. So we want to avoid that. The sex of the horse, when we're looking for horses for children, we should only be considering mares and geldings. We should never consider stallions as being appropriate for youth. And you may look back and say, well, I know a stallion that has such good manners and never displays stallion behavior. But we're not just concerned about the stallion's behavior, we're also concerned about the other horses around the stallion's reaction to the stallion. So if you have a mare in season, she's probably going to react to the stallion's presence, and that can get children in trouble trying to deal with this very natural, instinctive behavior, but fairly unpredictable behavior as well. Mares, again, will show signs of sexual behavior when they're in estrus or heat. They can be much more vocal. They can be more nervous at this point in time, more reactive to their surroundings at this point in time, and that's why a lot of people prefer geldings. I will say, though, that some of my best horses have always been mares, and that includes when I was growing up. So I never am too prejudiced against mares at all. A good mare is worth their weight in gold. So I think you really just have to shop around, and as long as you're keeping your focus on mares and geldings, you should be fine. In the horse world, especially when we're looking for a child's horse, size may very well matter. There's a lot of pony breeds out there and smaller horses that make great mounts for children just because they're easier for the kids to lead around. They're easier for the kids to groom themselves and saddle up all by themselves, as well as they're just safer when the kids are getting up and down off the horse. So size may certainly be a factor. However, if you find a horse that's 15'1", 15'2" hands high, but is exceptional in the level of training, exceptional in disposition, it may be worth seeing if that horse is going to be a good fit for your child and the family. Again, we're going to constantly talk about manners and temperament and level of training when we are trying to find the correct mount for our children. And that may supersede actually size. There's a lot of different breeds out there to look at and to get excited about, and they all have their pluses. Usually when we're talking about our stock breeds, which would include our quarter horses, Appaloosas, our paint horses, they're usually known as having a very calm demeanor. That's certainly not the case with every stock horse out there, but in general, they're thought to be a little bit more relaxed, a little less reactive in certain situations as some of our saddle horse or society type breeds. Also, the way that they move is going to be a little different. They're going to move flatter and lower. In some respects, if we're talking about Western pleasure type horses, they'll move a little slower in their footfall pattern or gaits. Specifically, we usually see stock horses competing in timed events like barrel racing and stake racing, or cattle events like team roping. We'll also see stock horses in Western pleasure events, Western riding, reining, trail, and, as well as hunter events. So very versatile horses and extremely popular here in the United States. Other types of horses are saddle type horses, and will include Arabians, Morgans, American saddlebreds, American show horses in this category. These horses in general would have a little bit more spirit or and lift and elevation to their gaits and their movement. Most people would consider them maybe a higher geared animal than our typical stock horse would be. They're very competitive in events like English pleasure, but they're also extremely versatile and can be competitive in stock horse or stock events or Western events, and as well as hunter events. So it really depends on what your interests are as to what breed of horse you're going to choose. Other horses that are extremely popular are gaited horses like our Tennessee walking horses and Missouri foxtrotter horses in the United States. These horses are especially popular for adults that are getting their first horse because of their smooth gaits, easygoing dispositions. They're very suitable for the trail as well. There's many pony breeds out there that are specifically bred for children to ride. So we have the Ponies of America, Welsh ponies, Shetland ponies that are really can be very good mounts for horses. But just because we're buying a pony doesn't necessarily mean that that pony has the training or the disposition to be a suitable child's horse, and we need to understand that as we look at any pony breed. One of the problems that you may see when you're working with ponies is because they are so small, it's hard for adults to do to ride them and to do a lot of training with them. So they may develop bad habits simply because they're always being ridden by the young rider who can't make the needed corrections when they do misbehave. So that can be a problem with some of our smaller pony breeds. Draft breeds are actually gaining in popularity across the country, and even with 4-H'ers. 4-H'ers are riding draft horses, they're driving draft horses. Probably not the best choice for very young, small riders, but as a child gets into their teens, they really have a passion for draft horses, definitely something to consider. Another aspect of the equine industry that shouldn't be overlooked are donkeys and mules. The donkey and mule associations in the United States are very popular. They have a tremendous youth type of events tied along with it, and they're very family oriented as they get together and show their donkeys and mules. You can have donkeys and mules that ride Western pleasure, hunter under saddle, that drive, very versatile. The only aspect of donkeys that could potentially be a problem is sometimes other horses that aren't used to being around donkeys can actually be scared of them, whether it be the different scent that they smell or the sounds that the donkeys and mules make. Some horses are very, very reactive to this. So when a child is riding a donkey in a strange group of horses, potentially there could be some fallback from that. Now let's think a little bit more about the individual horse prospect that we're going to look at for our child. One thing we want to ensure is that the horse is sound enough to be serviceably sound. So what does that mean? That means that if we buy this horse, not that we can predict health or accidents in any situation, but we want to buy a horse that for the most part, we're sure that that horse is going to stay healthy for the next 5 to 7 years, or the time span that we plan to have this horse, then maybe sell it, or sometimes that horse just stays in the family forever. But a horse that's serviceably sound for a small child can actually have maybe a slight arthritis. As long as we can deal with it and we have the expertise through our veterinarian and our farrier to help us through some of the smaller problems, we can use horses that have some problems with soundness if we're just looking at maybe a walk-trot pony. So we don't want to overlook those older horses that might have a touch of arthritis. When we're looking at conformation, unless you're showing in a halter competition, and that's your goal, is to win in halter competitions, a horse doesn't have to have perfect conformation to be a good horse. Basically, we want to select a horse that has as good as possible conformation for what we're going to be asking it to do. But what's even more important than conformation, again, are the horse's manners and disposition. We can't change conformation, but if a horse is extremely bad-mannered or just has a bad temperament altogether, we're not going to be able to change that either. And that's the aspect that could actually be detrimental for our children. So when we're looking for a good child horse, we want a horse that's calm and pleasant to be around. We want to reject any bad habits, including rearing or bucking, kicking, or biting. These are unacceptable habits for a horse to have when they're around our children. Our children aren't going to be able to reinforce these bad habits correctly to try to extinguish them. So we need to just make sure that they don't have to. If a horse is very high-strung or overly sensitive, if they shy a lot, again, these are habits that we shouldn't subject our children to. Not only are they dangerous, but they're also very annoying, and they can turn a horse-loving kid into a very frustrated child really quick. When our children are riding the horse, they shouldn't have to deal with a horse that's very hard in the mouth, that's non-responsive to the bit, or that's ring sour, tries to head back to the barn at every chance, or won't leave the other horses out in the field, or is just very stiff and unwilling. So we never want to buy a horse that's showing any of these types of habits and think that we can change him over time. That's not only is that a rule for selecting our life partners, but it's also a good rule of thumb for selecting a horse. Never assume you can change a horse's bad habits. What you buy is probably what you're going to live with, and in some instances the habit will just get worse as time goes along. So where are we going to look for horses? One excellent source assuming that your child is in a structured lesson program, is working with your riding instructor to locate the right horse. There's a couple of advantages here. Your riding instructor knows your child's abilities inside and out by this point. Also, your riding instructor is going to want to select a horse that they too can easily work with and have your child progress as an equestrian. So that's an excellent way to get started as far as looking for horses. Trainers are also a good source of horses. Sometimes a trainer may be more apt to select a younger horse for a child, because they will help train that horse. I don't think that that's the best scenario. I really think we need to stick to the tried and true rule, especially for a child's first horse, that we get a horse that is already very well trained. But if you're looking at a teenager and this is their second or third horse, then potentially that's something you consider, is getting a horse that still needs some training, and you have access to a good trainer to help you work with both your youth and the horse. 4-H and pony club leaders are great access to horses that are out there. There's a lot of 4-H horses that their owner is going off to school, going off to college, and they need a new family to help other children learn the ropes of being an equestrian. Classified ads are another way to find horses. There's a lot of horse publications out in regional type of magazines or national magazines. The internet now is a good access to locate where horses are at that are for sale, as well as newspapers and classified ads. You always want to go and visit the horses. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. So you never want to buy a horse from any of these publications sight unseen. There are people that buy and sell horses as a living, and sometimes we coin them horse traders, and some horse traders may develop a bad reputation for selling horses, and sometimes even misrepresenting horses as they sell them. But then there's other horse traders that are extremely conscientious. So you want to do some research into, if you're working with a horse trader, what is their reputation? How do people refer to them locally? What kind of success stories do you hear from dealings with this particular individual? There's also horse rescues all throughout the country, and basically they're taking horses that have been rescued from poor welfare type situations, or maybe the horse had some sort of illness or lameness that the last owner wasn't able to deal with, so they're brought to a rescue type of situation. These usually do not make the right first horses. It's very hard to predict how that horse, once it recovers completely, how that horse is going to behave. There's usually not a lot of history that comes with the horse. If they have been in an abusive situation, they've probably developed some very defensive type of behaviors, which again, a first-time horse owner is probably not going to be able to deal with. So probably not the best source for first-time horse owners. There's also horse sales, the weekly auctions, the weekly local auctions that go on, as well as some of our bigger sales that are associated with major horse shows or major horse farms. Even some university horse programs will have some very nice horses for sale on an annual basis. When you're looking, though, for a first horse, weekly auctions probably are not the right place to get started. A lot of times these horses are being sold at these smaller auctions because they can't be sold through private treaty. Either they have a behavioral problem or a health problem that prevents them from being very sellable. In your annual sales, a lot of times you're looking at very high-end horses or very young horses or breeding stock. So it may be harder to find a good child's horse in those type of sales as well. When you're looking at horses, then there are some tricks of the trade that you need to look out for and be aware of. Probably the most common avenue for changing the temperament of a horse before a sale is somebody will just get on the horse and ride them into the ground before the prospective purchaser arrives. They'll leave time to hose the horse off and let them dry so that the person coming in is very unaware that this horse has been ridden for 3 hours straight in the hot sun. This can do a lot to significantly calm a horse down for a very short period of time. But once the person buys the horse and brings it home, they may have a totally different horse with a different personality on their hands. So we want to make sure that that's not a factor in how the horse is behaving. Another thing that is all too common in the horse industry is using drugs to either change the attitude, calm a horse down, or to mask a unsoundness or lameness in the horse. And a veterinarian may be able to detect if a horse has been drugged when they do a pre-purchase exam. But it's going to be harder for a beginner horse person to make that detection. Something else that can be done with older horses is to file their teeth down so that when you look in their mouth and you try to age the horse by their teeth characteristics, they appear to be younger in years than they actually are. Some people will go as far as to dye the gray hairs around a horse's eye socket and muzzle so that they appear younger. Or you will even see at times false registration papers being traded with horses to increase the value of that horse. For all of these reasons, it's extremely important that when you go and look for a horse, that you bring an expert along. And even if you have a pretty good background in horses, this is always a good idea. For one thing, you need somebody to look at this horse that's unbiased and unemotional. Sometimes, even as experienced horse people, we can get very emotional about the purchase of a horse. So it's nice to have somebody be the voice of reason in those circumstances. You want to make sure that this expert is expert in your field of interest. So if you're interested in competing in barrel racing, you bring somebody with a background in barrel racing to help you select that horse. This person needs to have a good understanding of your ability as well as what resources are available to you. And this person should ride the horse after the owner rides the horse, but before your child gets on the horse. A lot of times professionals in the industry will help you find a horse, but they will require a fee to do this. And it's usually well worth the cost as long as this person is trustworthy and has the experience to back up their opinion. When you go for the first visit of the horse, you want to watch the horse with other horses out in the field or even in a stall environment. Is this horse very aggressive with other horses? That could be a problem as you handle the horse on a day-to-day farm routine. You want to watch how the owner handles the horse. Are they scared of the horse? Are they tentative around the horse? Or are they overly aggressive with the horse? Watch the owner ride the horse. How does the horse handle? Watch your expert ride the horse. Is the horse acting properly? What does the expert think about the horse's training and disposition? If all goes well with the above, then it's time for the youth to ride the horse and try it out, so to speak. You want to make sure that you ask lots of questions during this first visit. For that first ride, all youth should always wear an approved riding helmet. There's just simply no reason to take chances with our children's safety. Wearing a helmet, even when doing groundwork around a horse, is really important to keep our children as safe as possible when working with horses. You want to make sure that your child is riding in a closed arena. I've seen many situations where people have gone out to look at a horse and there's no arena, no closed location to ride this horse. And for a child, that can just be a recipe for disaster. So make sure that there's a good riding arena to work the horse, or you may need to take the horse someplace where there is a riding arena. For kids, you may also want to bring their saddle or a saddle that fits. A lot of times horses or a horse farm may not have a saddle small enough to fit a young child. And you never ever want to put your child in a dangerous situation. So if there's any question whether the horse is too much for the child to handle, don't let your child take that ride. Obviously your child may be disappointed, but it's just not worth risking the safety. Some questions to ask the current owner is everything you can about the health history of that horse. Has the horse colicked, foundered before? Are there any lameness problems, any respiratory problems like heaves? Any past surgeries that you should know of? How often does that horse get shod? Does the horse require any special shoes? How does the horse behave when it's getting shod? For some horses, if there's any question whether the horse has had navicular or has foundered or requires special shoes like pads, you may also want to get a farrier to come and evaluate that horse prior to purchasing. And at least that way you know how much money you're looking at as far as your 6-week farrier bills go. You want to ask about the behavior of the horse. Does the horse have any history of biting, kicking, rearing, or bucking? And then any other day-to-day routines involving the horse. How is the horse fed? Does the horse get turnout? Does the horse ever go on trail rides? What is the horse's show experience? How many past owners has the horse had? And what is the tack preference of the horse? If you're buying a registered horse, you'll usually get the names and address of the past owners of the horse. And a lot of times you can find out some really good information by calling up these owners and asking them about that particular horse. For your second visit, you want to show up unannounced. And this sounds kind of rude, but remember we talked about all of the tricks of the trade. If we show up announced, then we know that more than likely the horse hasn't been ridden down, the owner hasn't had time to give the horse any drugs of any sort, and we can see the horse for what it is. So you may want to just use the excuse, well, we were just passing by and thought we'd stop in, and sacrifice a little bit of politeness to see the horse as is. After that, then, once you've decided that this is the horse for you, you need to have a pre-purchase exam performed by a qualified equine practitioner. And this veterinarian needs to be unbiased, so it should be the buyer's choice, not the seller's choice of a veterinarian. If you're looking at horses that you're going to pay a lot of money for, or horses that the veterinarian suspects may have a problem with soundness, the vet may want to take some x-rays. You need to remember that few horses actually pass a pre-purchase exam. In other words, no horse is perfect. And frequently the vet then will be able to discuss with you what they found in the horse, what they think the horse's physical or health limitations might be, and how those problems might be managed on a day-to-day routine. You can discuss the health records of the horse, and always when you're purchasing a horse, a current negative Coggins test should be required with the purchase. Some warning signs as you're working with a horse would be tail ringing, ear pinning, if the horse dives to the center of the arena when it's being ridden, if a horse is very resistant to the bit, if the horse looks like they're sore, and they're showing any signs of lameness. These are all warning signs that more than likely this isn't going to be the right horse for your child. Something else to be aware of, never buy a horse that's thin for a child. That horse, a thin horse, may have a great disposition, or a seemingly great disposition. And once you take it home and you feed it correctly and the horse gets more energy, that gentle disposition may turn on you, and the horse may be more energetic and reactive once it's healthy. So we want to look for horses that are in good health, good body condition when we're purchasing a horse. There's really no way to give a very good picture of what to expect with estimated cost. In my own experience, if you're looking for a non-registered or grade horse that would be appropriate for trail riding or pleasure riding, you're probably looking at spending at least $1,000 on up. Entry-level show horses for small open shows or the 4-H level may be $2,000 and up. Intermediate show horses would be around $3,500 and up, depending on their training and experience level. And then advanced show horses, at least starting at $5,000. And some of our Congress champions and national champions are going to run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But keep in mind that price may not determine suitability. So that $100,000 horse may still not be the right horse for your 9-year-old. You're really looking for the right temperament, the right type of manners, and how well that horse has been trained and how suitable that horse is for your child. If you feel any pressure at all when you're looking at a horse to purchase, you need to leave. You should never purchase a horse under pressure. There's always another good horse out there for you to look at later on. Always take time to think about your purchase, even if you're concerned that somebody else is, or you're told that somebody else is currently looking at the horse. You never want to make a purchase decision based on that fact alone. Once you decide to purchase a horse, you want to make sure that you leave with that you've signed a purchase contract and that you have a copy of it with the owner's signature as well. You don't want to rely on a handshake in the horse industry. If a horse is registered, you need to make sure that you're going to get the signed transfer papers, and you should take a look at the transfer papers prior to leaving with the horse to make sure they're all in order and ready to be mailed. If you have problems once you get the horse home, definitely work with a good instructor and trainer. Don't leave it up to your child to fix a horse's problems. It's just too dangerous. Even though you've taken your time and you've worked with experts, you may still end up with a horse that's not suitable for your particular situation. And even though it's hard and it's emotional and sometimes it ends up in a financial loss, it's always better to cut your losses in those type of instances to make sure that somebody doesn't get hurt. And remember, even experts make wrong horse purchases. It's just every once in a while you bring something into the barn and you realize after a fairly short amount of time, oh, this wasn't necessarily the best decision, and you have to move forward and adjust that. However, when you do make the right decision, it's a decision that's going to last for your child's lifetime. My first horse was a little grade mare named Bluebonnet. She stayed with our family. We got her when she was 7 years old. She stayed with our family for another 21 years before she passed away, and she was a huge part of me growing up. She was a huge part of my family relationships with my mom and dad, as well as I made so many friends through owning and showing and just riding and having fun with her. So when it works, it's one of the best things that can happen to a young life. So with that, I want to tell you thank you for visiting with My Horse University. We've enjoyed having you. Please visit My Horse University's website at www.myhorseuniversity.com, and you can find out more information about our upcoming web presentations as well as our online courses and DVDs that we have available. Take care.